You're live.
We were live at Senate Transportation Wednesday, March 20th. We are going to talk about the House Transportation Bill, otherwise known as T-Bill, H68, which I think is in third reading today. So we will officially take possession of it next week, but in preparation for that, we are going through it. So today we're with the council, going section by section to decide which sections we are okay with and what sections we either want taken out or changed, or we need more testimony or have questions. So with that,
Donna Russo, Savage Legislative Council. Section 1 is the typical one you have. It adopts the proposed transportation budget, and except as amended by this act, and includes a number of definitions. The only definition that is here that has not been in prior ones that I know of is on page 3, line 5, mileage-based user fee.
That's the only new definition.
Yes.
Okay, any questions in section 1?
Let's close it out.
Okay, so that's closed out.
Now we're to number 2. I definitely am opposing this.
So section 2 is the series of transfers that takes
1.7 from our public transit.
from carbon reduction federal funds and puts it through a series of other transfers and eventually ends up with to the AOT to transfer transportation funds to the ACCD for EVSE charging awards, 1.7 million.
So we're not going to close this out,
No.
but we'll just skip over discussion on it. I think we're aligned, so we want to come back to talk about this section and
When the money is changed.
yeah.
Just one very minor thing I'll tell you is at the bottom of page 6, the only amendment that was made yesterday is to remove subsection E, which is the transfer from central garage fund to the transportation fund. And that was just removed because that's something that the appropriations committee likes to include in the big bill. It was just put in here so that we will remember it, and then they took it and they're going to put it into the big bill.
Okay. They did that on second reading.
They did, because appropriations had possession of it, and then they did an amendment to remove that. That's the only amendment that was made to it yesterday.
Okay. So this 1.7 million is taken from electrifying fleet and goes to public charging stations we are going to talk about later. So we're going to keep that section open.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Both of you, as far as, are you opposed to the dollar amount or just where it's coming from?
No, I'm concerned about taking the money from the grant that right now would fund the Sprint Advance and support our public transit infrastructure. And I just see that that's going to benefit a lot more Vermonters in transportation needs than necessarily the chargers, which maybe we can fund through some other way.
Right.
Okay, I'm very much in line with that.
So I just think our public transit folks are really operating on a very thin margin, and they need the ability to respond more nimbly to transportation needs and demands.
I have a related comment. So this past Monday, I did meet with Clayton Clark as well as a few other legislators and the GMT team. And right now, their current plan is to draw down all of their reserves to the point where they will have nothing at the end of this budgetary cycle. And if the legislature does not find additional funding sources, they will be left with no other course of action than to cut service by 29%, which the city of Winooski has already talked about pulling out of the GMT assessed municipality. So if we don't find ways to support public transit, and our largest one that is directly helping address our carbon emissions, GMT will likely collapse a year out from now, and they will need some resources or some assurances that the funding is going to them. So I think that's a broader topic, but I need to press and advocate for my constituency.
Oh, I hear you, man.
For resources to keep them afloat.
And that's part, we can
That's larger, because they need base operating, support, and this is really one-time capital.
Right. But one time, well, we can talk
Well,
about
it
it,
makes your
there might
point.
be other money that we
But
can't.
it makes your point as far as how you wanna keep that, where you wanna keep that money, as far as at least in
Yeah,
that,
because the one
that
hundred
focus
and
out.
47,000 was a base reduction, I believe, to the maintenance budget, off the top of my head. Is that right? Yes.
In this section,
Well, as part of juggling the money around, yes, there was 147,000 for e-bikes. But in order to do that, it was basically ending up as a base reduction in the maintenance budget.
but I don't think that's in this section.
No, oh, I'm just looking at the money.
Yeah, and I think that another issue with this section, if we do the EV road usage fee, that money. if
This
there
is probably the most helpful,
Yeah,
way to track money.
if we do that and we have some money for that fee, maybe some of that money could go for the EV charging of this section. Talks about.
Mhm.
So that's open, so through section 3.
Section 3 through 6 go together. Section 3 would reduce the maintenance budget by 2 million. And then 4, 5, and 6 would divide that up, so there would be an additional, section 4, there would be an additional 860,000 for town highway aid, an additional 1 million in section 5 for town highway structures, and 140,000 one-time appropriation for e-bike incentives in section 6.
I know we don't,
7,000 off.
so section 6, I know we don't support, but so I don't know about section 3, 4, and 5, how do people feel?
Well, I just wanna ask you a question about the 2 million. Instead of taking it from maintenance, and, I'll probably lean on Michelle on this, I mean, with the milder winter that we have, isn't it another place that maybe we're gonna have some savings as far as materials or salt or anything like that, so we don't have to take from maintenance?
So part
Salt
of
is
it.
part of it.
Okay, there we go, okay.
Yeah, and just to clear, for the record, Michelle Boomhauer, Agency of Transportation, just to clarify, when we arrive in those situations where we have a milder winter, then we basically each spring have a lineup of paving projects, quick paves and culvert replacements and other things we can do with the savings that we would accrue through the winter. So, any money that's taken away because of salt savings is just gonna reduce those activities.
And is that the district leveling or is that?
Yeah, district level.
What that's called? Okay.
If I can ask a question on that. So my understanding, my impression is that even with that capability, there seems to be, tell me if this is wrong, of an impression that we continually have a lot of excess carryover of monies not spent in maintenance. Is that not correct?
I would say there have been years where we have had to carry forward, and sometimes those carry forwards are dedicated to projects that we got underway before June 30th, where the bills haven't come in yet. And sometimes there are funds that, for lack of contractors or forces or whatever the situation is, we were not able to apply, and then we use the carry forward to reinvest in other projects in the subsequent fiscal year.
But carry forward is very common because oftentimes work is in progress, but the final bills don't come in until into the next fiscal year. So there's a very common carry forward authority to recognize that your expenditures don't fall neatly within a fiscal year.
Well, I'm gonna say, since we have an issue with section 6, which is connected to
I think
section
we took the
3,
money.
we're gonna keep all these open.
Yeah.
I like supporting the town highway projects, but we can have to discuss that later. I think we heard from several people on the committee, not a lot of support for section 6.
E-bikes,
I think it's time to wind that program down.
I think it is too. I would support that.
So that takes us, so that's also staying open.
Section 7.
And I believe that if that was the base, I would much rather put 140,000 for public transit, for example. But it's just a matter of having that
It's
discussion.
almost like the BAA, when you're just trying to shore up areas that are gonna be faulted, and
Right, it would be one time, but it would be helpful.
Right.
Logan,
Yeah, if I may, sorry, Logan Blueberry with Joint Fiscal. Just to the base discussion, the essential base appropriation would come into play with the town highway aid, not the e-bikes. E-bikes is one
Yeah,
time.
that's it, yeah.
So just want to make that clear. It's 860,000 to town highway aid. That would be a continuing appropriation.
And how much is the increase?
860.
That would go a long way towards helping public transit. I mean, even if you didn't do it all, but I'm just saying.
it does,
All over that.
it does get, when you do it in the town highway program, it gets spread very thin. So I don't know what the average town benefit, did you guys do any testimony on that now? It's like what the average town would get if you increased it by 860?
It's roughly, because every town's different depending on the amount of roads, but it's something like for every $1 million you put in, on average, it's like $3,700 to a town. Obviously, if your town has a lot of road, you get way more, but average it all out.
So the average, maybe, so this 860 is like $2,000 to $10,000
For most of it, yeah, it'd be spread very thin, like you said.
Yeah, well, if you just do it very easily for each mile that town has, I don't know, what's the total town mileage, and divide it into the 860, and then we'll give you how much
Right, you would
you
know,
get per
right.
mile, which would probably be 50 cents, I don't know, I mean.
Right,
all
some
of-
towns it'll be 1,500, sometimes it'll be $11,000.
Yeah, it depends on their mileage, but if you did it in terms of, this would just mean 25 cents per, across all state, town highways. That'd be an interesting calculation, we know the total.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, tables.
Could you calculate that out? for me?
What are you specifically?
I'm just saying, in other words,
Yeah.
if you had 860 that you're adding, you would take that and divide it by the number of miles of statewide
What's the-
town roads.
what's the-
How much
cents
are
per
you
mile?
giving per mile? And I think it would be like 50 cents, or I don't know, I'm just making it
You
up.
Logan can figure it out for sure.
What is, yeah.
I don't know off the top of my head, but
Come on.
I thought he just said you figured it out.
no, I
No,
can't.
you can't. We
I'll
can,
tell you by town. Logan can tell you by mile.
I think I have the total miles that account for the program.
I've seen it, I'm sure that you have a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I know, for you.
But still, it's a base reduction in maintenance. That's the thing. So, we're juggling between maintenance of the transportation infrastructure, that is done mostly by the district staff, which could be anything from culverts to, I don't know, guardrails to mowing to trees. And so, even if we move it to public transit, we're still having to weigh the priority around the money. But unless we, we move forward and deal with the issue around that interim plan for a registration surcharge for EVs and plug-in hybrids.
Either Don, I can't remember who, somebody told us before, or Logan, why they thought this base increase was, they had done some calculation.
Yeah, so that's essentially what the formula would have increased it by if you didn't take into account reversions, because there was a large, something like $34 million in reversions in fiscal year 23, I believe, something like that. And so when the calculation broke out, it was a negative growth rate, essentially negative appropriations. So if you remove that reversions, it would have grown by
Because
860.
part of the formula is the expenditure.
Well, it takes into the difference in appropriations, essentially given out, with T-fund appropriations. So
Oh,
check
the
that.
reversion really distorts that.
It does, so
Yeah.
they were like, well, what would it be if we didn't include reversions? The answer was it'd be a 3% increase, which was the CPIU increase, because there's a large formula to it, I can walk you through that, which was $860,000.
Okay, so those are options, we'll talk about them more in more detail.
I'd just like to make a note that section 6 is tied very closely to section 18, and I'll make sure that this is noted in my notes for the person who takes over for me. But, if changes are made to 6, then they're gonna need to be made to
Section
18.
18.
18, yeah, 6 and 18 have connections. Section 7 is the AOT bonding, authority. And on the bottom of page 11, it's that, in cases involving contracts for 100,000 or less, may waive the requirement of a surety bond.
Is this language that the DOT wanted, Michelle? This is section 7, the duties about the surety bond.
We requested that.
Following accruing the language on 11 of this shall.
This allows for, smaller entities to participate and have the flexibility
To give them a lower bond.
to give them a lower bond.
So we've had discussion about
Yeah.
that.
We talked about this one other time, and I don't remember why it didn't get.
So this gives you the ability, you may waive it.
And the language that's in the middle of page 11 is just moving the location to make it more readable.
Okay, anybody have any questions? We can close this section.
Usually, however, is preceded by a semicolon followed by a comma.
Are we on section 9 right now?
Well, that too.
I would like to bring that up. Could I? It's true, though. I believe.
What do you say,
That was how we,
You would, if you don't begin the sentence with however, you would have a semicolon, however, comma.
or you'd say in order to obtain the benefit of the security, however,
yeah.
yeah.
So this is what you guys wanted?
Yes.
Okay, now this isn't gonna affect, people from bidding any more than what we have?
That'll help them.
It'll help.
Okay,
The small contractors won't have to put up as a larger bond, which we had
It's
said
been
in
a
testimony.
barrier for many
Right.
years. I've talked to a lot of people, the Hardwick area, et cetera,
Oh, yeah.
who wanted to break into some small AOT projects, but just couldn't manage the bond situation.
Okay, so we're closing out section 7.
Section 8 is,
Should we correct it, however?
would you like me to?
What do you want to put the however in a different spot?
You could either do, Commissioner of Labor, semicolon, however, in order to obtain blah, 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 or you could just do in order to obtain however the benefit.
However you want to do it.
I'll defer to Donna, she's
Okay.
you actually said labor, almost like that,
labor.
that,
Labor.
TV commercial with Arnold, labor, we said labor.
Labor. What was that Howard Dean always said so pronounced?
Says idea.
Idea, that's what it was, idea.
Mother says that too.
What is Upstart?
And Vermonters say unthaw, which I find rather interesting too.
Yeah.
So if you unthaw it, you must freeze it, right?
Irregardless.
Yeah.
I had a Vermonter tell me that, because I talked about following a plow truck. He said, oh, I can tell you're not from Vermont, because we never called it a plow truck, we always just said plow. Which I hadn't heard anybody make that claim.
Okay, so I agree with that.
Yeah, I was like, really? So I was gonna start trying to pay attention. I should ask people. See what it is. Okay.
So, and for 100, you may waive the requirement. That should be really important.
So it's
So it's closed out except for the grammar change.
changing the
of
however,
But
exactly.
it just should it be unless you may waive or reduce,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
because
Yeah, we may
otherwise-
wanna have some bond,
Yeah.
but yeah.
not,
But is the bonding, it says up here, the surety bond shall be in such a sum as the agency shall direct.
Oh, there we go.
So the bond is, the $100,000 is the contract, not the bond.
but it says in lieu of a bond and in cases involving
Contract.
contracts, 100,000 or less, may waive or reduce, I wanted to
Well-
say may waive or reduce the requirement.
The requirement to what the bond is, if you look at in line 1 and 2, they decide what the bond amount shall be. There is no, where I see where they say the bond shall be X.
Well, then why do they need the waiver authority? If you-
Well, they could, I guess, put the bond at $1, but then you still have to do a bond.
That's a good question. This is not my area of expertise.
Surety shall be,
My guess is that
shall direct.
the bond was set based on the contract, but you're just saying like, hey, under 100,000, we're just not gonna need a bond, so let's just say, but maybe the law says you always have to have a bond?
The law says we always have to have a
Seems
bond,
like, yeah,
and we probably have policies around what the set amounts are based on the contract size. And I think
well, then you can't waive if the law requires you to.
no, we probably have like internal guidance, it's not say policy. I'd have to check with my finance folks.
I'm just wondering in terms of totally waiving, but you think reduction is provided by the agency shall direct? You know,
The surety bond shall be in such sum as the agency shall direct.
yeah,
So they could, I don't know, there might be something like, Michelle said that there's a formula based on the contract.
I'll check with my staff.
So for now, we're closing out, but I guess we'll,
yeah, I
Let us
guess
know.
we need to, just,
so we can not close it out.
well, I think we need to confirm whether, in fact, there is authority to reduce it to nothing, or whether the
You're waiving
authority
it.
up in number.
You're waiving it, that would be reducing it.
But if the law requires, or procedures require, I don't know, if regulations require, that there be a bond, then you don't have, the question is there authority to waive it?
Okay, well, that's one question.
That's my-
The other question is, do you need something about lowering?
Waive or reduce? Or lower?
Or raise?
What do you use,
Like
lower?
with raise with a Z, that would be like raising it down.
You've been in appropriations too long.
Okay, so
You
we
know what
have,
we're.
we have some work on section 7.
Okay.
Section 8 is pages 12 at the top
10G report, oh, we love
through
that.
the middle of page 20. Most of it is non-substantive. It is beginning on page 12 at the top through the middle of page 20 is section 8. And most of it is non-substantive technical changes. The real substantive aspect of it is on page 14, lines 6 through 16. And this is the two, when they are required to report, give project updates on ongoing
Oh my God,
programs.
this actually expands your reporting. Oh,
But this is the,
The creep,
following the recommendation from the auditor's report.
Is it?
That's my understanding is what the genesis of it was.
and it divides it into things that creep slowly over time, which are the amendments to subdivision 2, versus things that spike quickly in 1 year, which are which is the new language in.
so the auditor felt 8 million was too high? And 5 million's better?
That's what that's
5 million is
Well-
for the creep over time.
8 million is
And
that
8 million
too
if it's a
high.
spike.
This would add some projects to get reported.
Right.
We can have the auditor in.
Maybe the deputy auditor is listening.
Yeah, well, I did get an email from the auditor's office. But I haven't read it closely, but my understanding is the House, when they worked on this, they looked at the auditor's report generated. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
The exact numbers, I don't believe were in the auditor's recommendation, but they sort of based this language off stuff that came from that report, and the 5 million and 8 million were what they came up with, as well as the percentage, 75% and the 50%, I believe, were theirs, but based off the auditor's sort of report.
Language makes sense to me, but I'm always looking for an excuse to invite Tim Ash in, so if you want to have.
Well,
him
let's
talk
at
about it.
least check with the auditor's office about this language.
I mean, I think it was, the whole finding was that the estimates for projects were so out of whack, but,
That's
And
what
that's
caused
why-
the problem.
and that's the source of the problem. So now we've hired a person who actually has expertise in
An
doing
estimate.
those estimates and has a background in, developing bids, so.
Has the estimator been hired? We want to meet.
I think I don't know the answer to that, and I begin to have to schedule it for Harriet. to have this person come in and explain,
How they do
but
that.
they might be new, so new they won't,
Yeah, We'll have them
and this
next
is simply
week.
going to expand the 10G report, and I'll let Donna carry on, but at the bottom of, on page 14, line 16, you'll see that for the spiking, section 3 spiking projects that have a large cost estimate. Originally, that was including the development and evaluation report and the front of the book, and I did persuade the House that things on the D&E list are just conceptual in a very big way. We haven't even done scoping. So the price, we would then have to carry projects in this report throughout their life cycle after we've established sort of front of the book estimates that are really gonna guide the cost of the project.
Understood.
If I recall correctly from this conversation last year, a lot of the variability is that it just takes too darn long to build and do anything in this state. So by the time we approve this, it's 5, 10, 15 years out, and then that's where the estimates are askew. Is that?
That can happen for
Okay.
sure. I mean, when we get into protracted permitting and right-of-way processes, that drives the cost estimates up. So, this part of your book will just get thicker. I think the part that's probably gonna be more cumbersome for us, you'll see in a bit, which is who we tell when we report out. It's beyond the 10G.
Where's that's part of the same section or different section?
Part of the same section.
Section
Where I was going with that question is I'm curious, have we contemplated or considered some sort of time escalator with the estimate so that it doesn't necessarily fall into the report the more years it goes out, if we adjust the
We
threshold to
just don't
trigger it?
know. Every project is so different.
And I guess the question is, what difference does it make?
Right.
It's maybe good but if you're doing something over that multi-year time, it's sort of like, a 5-year budget, so to speak, and not, and then so many things can happen that never were anticipated. So I don't know what, even if you could say, well, we just want to know it. Well, I suppose that's helpful.
If I could try to invoke my inner Tim Ash, I'm wondering if where we might want to be pressing for is more accurate estimations for budgeting purposes. So if anything, this new estimator might speak to.
Well, that's my point,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
have,
You wouldn't have as big a 10G report if you.
We estimated more aligned with what we're seeing in reality in the state of Vermont for these projects. Because we're basically underestimating a fair amount, a notable amount that is leading to project costing more than we budgeted for.
I don't know if the 10G report has gotten bigger. I mean, maybe just the last couple of years because all the inflation and COVID and all that.
We've had a spike, and I think you're still not gonna prevent the cost escalation associated with time delays that we have no control over.
I think you gotta be very mindful of invoking policy now based on what you had just said. We just come off of 4 really, really, really tough years.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're going to have a skewed 10G report. You're just going to, it's just the way it is. And before you go and upending the apple cart, maybe we ought to just take a step back and see how it progresses from here on out.
I mean, you did respond to all the ones I remember, and a lot of them were,
Which is the section where you're talking about?
So, on page 16, starting, I guess it'd be starting on page
it shall notify the region planning commission, the district, so you could have a project that would cross planning, like a paving, and the municipality where the affected project is located. The legislators for the district where you.
So wait a second, so this is number 3 that starts at the bottom of 15.
Yeah, so,
If a project in the adopted.
A question I'd have for the auditor or deputy auditor is there intent partly to include it in these reports or to trigger these reports in order to incent more conservative estimating so as to try to get our projects to be higher or more aligned with what we're seeing in reality to motivate you to not get on the report?
I don't think the estimating is the problem. I think inflation has been the problem. Maybe in years gone by, estimating was part of the problem. But I feel like we've invested a lot of resourcing into estimating and to, tracking inflationary factors that are gonna impact projects. And I think it's these legacy projects that we get into that have very complicated right of way and permitting that really are driving this. And, and I think also, those factors lead to projects, you thought it was in the book, last year we sat here and it was gonna be built next year. And now I come back and I give you a new book, well, it's not gonna be built to the following year because we have a slowdown. And I think there was some concern that people didn't realize until they got the book, because they may not have been following the project with us or whatever, that the project had been delayed another year. And so I think that's what this notice is getting at. So basically, for every project that doesn't come in at the scheduled point, we're gonna have to go through this.
It seems like,
The project manager is gonna have to go through this notification.
just as if there's additional funding, that's the trigger, whether you have to notify everybody, or that's the earlier. Projects. When the affected project is like. Yeah, when do you have to do that?
But if you say Tim Ash's name 3 times, he sends you an email message, so we're
Yeah.
waiting for it.
Ms. Canella, you could maybe send an email to the auditor's office and see if they are interested in talking to us about section 8 of H868.
And I understand what you're saying about this particular subdivision, but I will just point out on page 16, the changes beginning on line 11 with crossing out the in the district affected. That particular change is only a grammatical change because as currently written in the district affected applies to everything, including the House and Senate committees. And so it was just moved so that it affects only the things that actually are in the district.
Because the municipality and legislatures were already listed, I see.
Yeah, they're already, regional planning commission, the municipality and the legislators are already there, and
Right.
in the district affected applies to them. But as currently written, it also applies to the House and Senate committees, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So it was just moved for grammatical clarity, not because it's anything different.
So if it's not any different, then what's the problem?
Because of I'm guessing possibly because of the number of programs that will fall into it, or that was what I was assuming was the problem.
In terms of the notification.
Yeah, it seems like this is just a restructuring of what already is required.
Yeah, this is just expanding the notification and, and I think the notion is that we're gonna be doing notifications as soon as we find out a project is not gonna make it into the white book. For whatever reason, the following year when we thought we were going to construction with a project. It was in the white book last year to go to construction this summer. We had a permit hang up and now we can't construct it this summer. That essentially would trigger a notification for it. And I think also the additional funding. I don't think it's the additional funding. I think it has more to do with the delay in this section. And so, honestly, we could come back next week here and give you an oral report on
But we'll
the
hear,
section
we'll hear from
and tell you
the,
how it worked out.
yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they're trying to do here, but we will have the auditor in and, or the auditor or the assistant auditor, whatever.
Would you like to hear
Yeah.
from Jeremy Reed?
We should say it, the auditor, the assistant to the auditor.
Jeremy Reed might want to come in and testify on this section also. He
Okay.
testified in the House and he has a firmer grasp on the mechanics
Okay.
of this section than I do. It really more specifically refers to what happens in the highway division.
Or maybe we can also ask Jeremy to come in for section 7.
I even, ten,
Section 8.
Section-
I think 9
I'm
relates to.
trying to read this,
Section eight.
I'm not even sure I understand what it says, with respect to projects in the approved transportation program, the secretary shall notify regional planning commission or the district where the affected project, the municipality, and that will likely,
I think if you
of
look at the
any
beginning
change,
of that,
of any change that will likely affect the fiscal year in which the project is planned to go to construction. Of any change. Oh, okay. Well,
Where's any change?
well, it's line 15 and 16. In other words, I'm trying to figure out with respect to projects, what, how to define what projects are subject to this requirement. And I guess it's with, the projects are in the approved transportation plan. And if there's any change that will affect the fiscal year in which the project is planned, then you have to notify.
Yeah, so this is the timing.
Yeah.
If it's not gonna get constructed this year, it's been delayed a year, we need to come back.
But also, it's like if there's any, and on the beginning of 3, this is all part of section 3, it says, well, the current fiscal year, that requires additional funding to maintain. So like, if there's, I think that's another trigger. If there's any additional funding, that triggers some of this notification at the beginning of 16.
But if in fact it's all within the context of funding as opposed to permit and other delays, that's what I'm trying to sort out.
I think, yeah, it might be both. Might be if there's any,
Two things going on.
yeah, funding or changing the fiscal year.
You might wanna maybe
Which is, I think-
segregate this into two subsections, I don't know.
I
Well, so it was,
don't, I think we need some testimony because I'm not sure exactly what it is that we're trying to address here. What is the workload attached to it and what is the utility of the information? I mean, to me, those are the fundamental questions we should be asking, that we're not getting now and toward what end. So I'm struggling with it.
Question I'll have for Jeremy Reed is it feasibly or would it be advantageous to consider a delay time escalator amount to reduce the trigger for this to come on the report? That's probably,
like an automatic.
so if it's 5-10 years out, then the threshold to trigger for the 10 years is different than the original estimated amount.
Then you're just gonna have to estimate inflation. No one would have estimated what 7.5% we had.
But anything we put in there would lower it.
We could align it with inflation, so use the reported inflation. I don't know.
Well, I thought you were talking about projected inflation over the next 10 years.
So let's say we approve a project this year, 5 years from now, we know what the inflation was over those 5 years, so when triggering the report, if the unestimated amount stood within that amount. Stood within
If
the,
it's still on the books.
yeah,
Like kind of basically automatically increase the cost.
the threshold to trigger the Route 10G report. But I don't know these things well.
That might be harder to program
Right, and
into
then-
a reporting system than just.
Putting it in the plan, because you would be updating it every year, right, in your plan?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
change
we
the
do
cost.
we change the cost estimates
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah,
in the
so
plan.
are we getting it, I would think, as long as that project is still in the front of the book?
Yeah.
If you're actually making those adjustments,
Is
Yeah,
there a backup book anymore? Like we used to.
well, the D and E is in the back of the book and the,
reports are in the.
the other, what's the other one?
D&E,
Development and evaluation.
That's
There
right.
used to be another
Early phase.
report back there, but I think that's gone. I think we just have D and E and then you go to front of the book.
Aren't
Front of the book
the
is the.
10Gs are not in the back of the book?
10G's in the back of the book.
Yeah.
I think we already have. I think the first part of the 8 million to 5 million and 100% to 75% gets at, like, we're only gonna have things come into the 10G report when we've had a significant change. But I think that this matter of when we start with, when they first appear in the book, they, maybe some years they'll be on the 10G report because they had a significant change and for whatever reason we didn't anticipate, and then other years they'll be lower than that construct, and so they won't be in the 10G report. Although doesn't this language have them carry that project regardless of what change the project experiences once it becomes on that 10G list?
It says of any change that will likely affect the fiscal year in which the project is planned to go to construction. So it's only for the beginning, not something in progress?
No, it should be for things in progress as well.
It says any that will affect the fiscal year in which the project is
If you're
planned to
thinking
go.
about the bottom of page 19, O, section O, the year of person.
Need a document.
Yeah, because the project initially approved. And adopted,
This is the current
will
language.
include the year in which the project.
Yeah, because it does set the threshold of being, the benchmark is always gonna be the first year it was in the front of the book. And you're always measuring against that, so it'll continually stay on the 10G report versus, you know, if you had it in rotation, so that, you know, yeah, it comes onto the 10G report if we've had a big spike in cost. But then we're level setting, y'all know that it
Right.
happened, and then it should then come off the 10G report and only come back on if it has another spike in cost.
And you think that what the House did was make it like, it's once on the 10G, always on the 10G.
I think so.
I
What do you
believe
think, Logan?
on, let's see, page 14, line 11. I believe this is talking about all projects for which the total estimated costs have, for the first time, increased by more than $8 million.
For the first time.
So then, anytime after that, they won't be reported on the 10G. It's
Okay.
only the first time that they make that trigger.
Okay, they won't stay on.
They won't stay on. No, and Anthea, I worked with Anthea to make sure
Okay.
that we added this in so that it wasn't just a continually growing 10G forever and ever.
What if it meets this threshold the second time?
Or it goes another eight.
Then it does, if it goes over another 8 million,
Yeah.
Oh,
I think.
yeah, it would still be in the calculation.
It would still be,
Calculation would
because
still hold.
it only hits the threshold the first time it goes over that 8 million or 50% from when it was first adopted. So if it continues to grow, it won't be put on there anymore, just the 1 year that it meets. the threshold.
Unless it falls under the.
Two, what about?
Unless it falls under two, as a
Right, in the
separate thing.
future, right.
Thank you.
Prior, which just
So
looks
that's
back.
probably what you're thinking of.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, so I think yes, I think I've got that straight in my head now. Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah. Okay, we'll hear more of that. Section 9 is related.
It is the plan for reporting delays. Or the report for the plan.
File a written report containing a plan for how to provide sufficient, so
Plan for reports about future reports.
This is on, what page are we now?
Page 20, line 10.
what is your response to that one, Michelle? It seems, I don't really understand what this is trying to do.
They want to plan for how to be notified when projects aren't taken up.
This had to do with the conversation.
Didn't set us up and say notify us when you're,
Yeah, but I don't know that it said like when to notify us, and I think we had a little bit of a go around on that because part of my question, trying to think this through, is oftentimes we don't, you know, like the project is going to construction next year. You know, we're planning our budgets out 18 to 24 months in advance. And so we are making decisions about the governor's recommend in August, September, October of, all right, in this case, we'll say last year's, there's 23. We're presenting you the 25 budget, and that's sort of the governor's plan. And then, you know, that may include us having moved projects from 1 year to another because we couldn't fit everything in because there was inflation or whatever. And so some of the projects that were in the book that were planned to move forward, maybe it wasn't the current fiscal year or the following one, but they got moved, their schedule got moved. Because we just couldn't fit them in the budget. So I kind of got into a discussion about like, when do we notify the communities
right?
without revealing the governor's recommend? And I think that triggered some
You know, it
concerns.
seems to me what you almost need to do, like we do a budget adjustment.
Yeah.
And it's presented in January.
Yes,
Because what you're doing is adjusting the plan and the
Yeah.
spending
Yeah.
based on actual experience within the
Yeah.
fiscal year. So it seemed to me that we already have got kind of a comparable process with other areas of spending. And then you come in and you do it as sort of a plan adjustment. And then you build your future as you would normally.
Yeah.
To me, that would be there's a model for that already, if we wanted to apply it to to the transportation plan.
But when you run into the same problem of having the governor show his cards as far as.
Well, that's why you can't do it before December 15th, because
Well, we don't know until.
We don't know until the end of January.
You don't know.
so-
Oh, yeah.
third week of January. And so, because we're making decisions of well, what if we delay this one or that one and not the other one, and to build the budget. And if we start telling people in August their project's been delayed.
Right, it might not be, or they'll say, what project are you doing instead? And
Yeah,
So
I
it's
don't know, it's complicated.
well, but with the budget adjustment, you don't do that.
No,
so you could do it in January.
You could do it in January, and you could shall file an adjusted transportation plan.
Right.
I mean,
Something like that.
when
Isn't
you-
the proposed,
But isn't that basically what you do when
an
you create
adjusted,
a new?
yeah,
every year when we give you the new book, white book,
Which
that's
you
the
do.
adjusted transportation
And
plan.
that's what you do when the governor gets the budget. That's when we get the votes.
Exactly. So you do know, what's gonna go to construction this year when you get that
Right.
book, and if it changed from last year. But I think there was an interest in finding out, like, if we're making that decision back in August, people wanna know back in August. And people don't necessarily wanna be surprised by what's in that book.
Right.
They wanna have gotten a specific notice directly versus looking it up in the book.
Right, they may, this plan, this report on the plan might just say, might be 2 sentences of what you just said.
It could be that. Yeah, I think the other thing is, for projects of any significant scale, like if we're doing an intersection project or a roadway reconstruction project or a bridge project, we have like a project page. We have a place where we have communications consultants for all those projects. There's usually a newsletter update that goes out, so you can sign up to be on the email list.
Like the Barton repaving, I've got
Yeah.
more notices on
Yes,
that.
exactly. And so, I don't know that it matters for projects that are of a smaller scale, other than if somebody had been advocating for a particular project and then wasn't on the list and didn't get a notice.
Well, what this does is set forth a date and a requirement to report on something that basically has not been finalized.
Yeah.
Until the governor makes those final decisions.
Yeah.
So your report would be nothing, because you have nothing to report, because nothing has been officially delayed until you do the plan.
Well, I think section 9 is saying that's not okay, and tell us how you can make it happen, what your plan would be.
Right, well, it doesn't, because you were there for the conversation, but the words just say, provide sufficient notice, but your report can say, our sufficient notice will be on the day that the governor gives this budget.
Yeah, I mean, that could be I know that's not what they're looking
So
for, but yeah.
I don't see this adds anything. I think the timing is wrong. People would like to have kind of a scoop on the process before any decisions are finalized. So maybe we should just get rid of this section.
I would agree with that.
I'm not seeing it as feasible to circumvent our current process of timing. I think there's just a certain
Oh,
amount
thank you so much.
of uncertainty that you can't adjust for, get rid of.
You're supporting getting rid of it? Rachel, do you feel like getting rid of this?
I do. I just think it's problematic. I think it's asking for information that the administration is not going to reveal at that point in the budget. The plan is really their proposed budget spending. So I think we need to recognize that reality and get rid of it.
Okay, we're proposing to strike section 9. Section 10.
Section 10 clarifies the method by which inflation calculations are calculated for transfers to the central garage fund. And then 11 is the same thing, and it is for appropriations for town highway aid. And Logan will be able to tell you in much more detail, but my understanding is this is just clarifying how it's done because the current language isn't clear about how it is being done.
Correct, yep, no real substantive change, just making clarification, so this was a JFO recommended change to make it.
That's if the percentage change is zero, if it was negative, because we did have a negative at one point.
Yeah, it's always been the same, and this language here doesn't change how the calculation works, it just makes it so theoretically anyone can read the language and come up with the same answer as anyone else reading the language.
So it's clarification.
Yeah.
There was a time when there was negative, and remember back in 2016, the teachers, and
Right.
retirement benefit would have actually had to be reduced, and so, there is a protection against a reduction. Seems like this is comparable.
Yeah, it can never go down, it can only be zero or up.
Unless we know.
Correct.
Is that also what we're doing for the town highway aid, just clarifying, or is this changing it?
Nope, just clarification on that one too.
Okay, so section 11 is okay.
If we can,
10 and 11,
10
both?
and 11 are closed out.
And no concerns from
Section 12 concerns waivers or fees for right-of-way permits. And this would permit the secretary to waive the collection of a fee for a permit that is issued if it's a minor commercial development and if it's during the time that the governor has declared a state of emergency.
The agency probably requested that.
We did.
Senator Shannon?
Are we going to take up that topic that keeps percolating regarding right-of-way fees?
Yep.
In the context of this section?
Yes. Well, we
This
could,
is different.
This is
This
different?
is the 1111 permit, like to relocate your driveway or any work within the highway access would normally require permit and money. So this is different.
if you're touching the right of way, then you need 11. Or 11.
Yeah.
Or a 1111.
This is a processing fee for staff to go out, review the plans, et cetera, yeah.
One say one.
Versus occupation fees, which is H 657.
But yes,
What it's worth, I mentioned this in finance because that is raising money and Senator Cummings said multiple times really ups transportation, so she's really yielding to us on this one. We want to.
but this will cause the bill to go to finance.
Yeah.
That's fine. We know somebody on finance that'll help shepherd it.
When you say this, I mean the other broader topic about right-of-way fees.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is also affecting fees. Because they could waive the $250 fee. So we're okay
The word
with,
de minimis.
De minimis.
did we use the word de minimis?
No,
No, we
they
will.
can use the word.
Oh, this is
They
our
can use-
opportunity?
They can use that
I
I
word.
think
yeah.
JFO might have used that word.
We're good?
So is this an okay?
Section
Yeah.
12 is closed out.
Okay.
13.
13 begins the vehicle incentive programs. Section 13, which is page 24, line 7, this is when you are returning or exchanging an older low-efficiency vehicle under the Replace Your Ride program. Current law is that you have to have actually passed all elements of the annual inspection required in the prior year. This is saying that the vehicle had to have passed the safety inspection portion, but didn't necessarily have to have passed the emissions or onboard diagnostic systems portion.
Does it also have to be registered?
That's in other parts.
Can you register it without doing the safety inspection?
Yeah, you can. I think so.
But what about the emissions? I thought I had to pass the emissions test before.
That's a
we-
problem.
This is,
Right.
this is the vehicle that is being returned.
Right, well, I just wondered, I thought these vehicles would be returned or like are gonna be junked.
They are going to be junked. I think what we're trying to avoid in.
Somebody taking a junk car off the back lot.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
But that's why I thought
It has to have
registration.
been registered for 2 years by the owner who's bringing it forth to turn it in. And it also has to have passed a recent safety inspection. But the point of this is like, all right, so they've been driving this car, they go to get it inspected, they can pass the safety inspection, but they can't pass emissions, and therefore, they can't they
Right.
can't
Well,
get the
here's
car
an idea.
inspected, and then if they wanna like use it for replace your ride, they still can.
Well, here's an idea. Why, if somebody's registered it, which means they're driving it, which means it's a car they're using, but they go to get it inspected and they fail the inspection, and they're like, hey, I wanna replace your ride. We're saying, sorry, you can't, because you didn't get inspected. You have to pay to get it fixed, so we can put it in a crusher.
I would,
That's a good point.
okay.
Why would we care if it passed the safety inspection if we're gonna put it in the crusher?
Maybe the point is must have passed the safety within the prior year. Okay, so already in statute, it says within the prior year. So,
So they don't want somebody just going pulling a junk
Right.
out of this
But
somewhere.
it has to be registered.
Right.
yeah,
Like,
and so if you had it inspected 12 months ago, you've been driving it, and you go to get it inspected now, doesn't pass inspection for safety, you don't wanna put the money in, that still counts.
Okay, that's the prior year inspection.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
This might be hair splitting.
I,
I,
well, I don't know if that works because you can't pass a portion. You can't pass, but not necessarily the emissions.
Current law just says passed the annual inspection required.
But my only point is, without you
Yeah.
can't meet the safety inspection
Yeah, you're not gonna get a sticker.
pass. You can't pass if you're.
Yeah, I don't know, right, I don't know,
The inspection of the onboard diagnostic system is defective.
you're not really passing.
Why do we even have to get into that at all? If all we're trying to do is make sure they're not bringing a vehicle off the back lot that has, why can't we just say that it was registered?
Well, that's why I wonder, you can register a car that you're not driving, it's just
Yeah,
sitting there.
yeah.
So you pay the registration fee and then tow it to this.
Yeah. Which would be a lot.
Okay, or
We could just say-
registered and inspected,
How about say, well, that's what it said before, was
but
it's-
without the,
They were trying to help somebody that passed the safety inspection but didn't pass the emissions part, to still allow it to participate, not have to fix the.
Yeah, but I guess I'm not understanding this, I'm like thinking I'm gonna have to have Patrick come back.
Yeah, you really need, they pass this, they can't pass if they've got they can't,
It just says the,
OBD system is not functioning, they can't pass, so you've
well,
got kind of.
it's the inspection portion. So can you pass
So
just
you
a
won't,
portion of it?
right, you won't, you get a,
You don't have a portion of the inspection, you either pass or you don't, I think what we'd say would have passed except for the onboard systems inspection. In other words, you can't pass it without the OBD functioning,
Right.
and so we're saying they passed the,
Would have passed.
so, something like that.
And honestly, I don't know, oh, sorry. I guess I'm trying to imagine like, I think what Senator Purchase was trying to get to earlier, which is whether it's the safety or the onboard diagnostics, at that point, it doesn't matter anymore because you might have passed it all a year ago. You had to have passed it all a year ago to get to this point, and it doesn't matter which part you don't pass
That's
now.
compromise language. So this is really to guard against the exploiting of the system where somebody could grab a junker that's been sitting out in a field somewhere for a while.
cash for clunkers.
What if we just say, absent the safety inspection and or the emissions, if we just require that any car traded in for this had been passed an annual periodic inspection within the last 18 months? Because, when it's a yearly inspection, you'd find out that year, so it would have been a year prior. So 18 months, I could even go 2 years, but if there's real concern within the last 18 months or 24 months, if it had passed a Vermont periodic inspection.
Something like
It
that.
could be used for the
But this
program.
is really very hard to interpret because you can't pass it without,
Right.
there's not a two-part test to passing.
his version or?
I think what I like Senator Chin's version where we just say, hasn't passed the inspection in the past 18 months. And not try to
Yeah.
do the
Right.
OBD part.
If you fail, then you have 6 months to basically use that car for this replace your ride.
I do
program.
think what we were looking at was.
Or you could drive illegally.
And we're gonna say we have,
You go figure.
Right,
so it's gonna be 18 months. Okay. Okay,
not a year.
So we're gonna change language there.
That's gonna get
13, yep.
I will hold that.
section 14, I have a note from when you spoke about this last, and I'll bring that up in a minute, but this is the, if a vehicle has been totaled during a declared state of emergency, then under the Replace Your Ride program, the agency has the authority to waive some of the requirements for eligibility if the car was actually totaled
Probably
during the state.
retroactively giving you authority to what you did.
That was what your comment was last time.
Oh.
Should this have a retroactive effective date?
Well, I'm at least I'm consistent.
Consistent.
But we also want to have it so that if there's a future
Right, but.
flood or disaster, it would come,
But
but
it's-
also this is what the
Yes.
state did. Did Michelle, did you respond that you didn't need the retroactive, or you were gonna go look at it?
We don't need it retro.
You don't, but you did it.
I need to double check.
Because I think later, yeah, somebody,
Asher's like texting. I'm gonna see if he can zoom in.
okay, I think there was,
But the section itself is okay, it's just the effective date we're talking about, or?
I don't think we didn't issue any waivers under this, but we anticipated that it might have been, something.
we had some
wanted.
flood vehicles.
I thought that was one of the things we had on the list as
Right.
responding, so that's why I'm thinking like retroactively, we've approved a number of things.
Yeah, but I think that we didn't end up,
Doing any vehicle replacement?
doing any vehicle replacements.
Oh.
And
Well, then that's,
there is a little bit more to the story on the last section, related to the fact that we already have an emissions waiver. Patrick is available without Steel Tie to zoom in if you want to hear from him today, otherwise we can talk about it another day.
About the OBD thing?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just talk about
Another day.
it? We work it, we'll see the language we like, and then
then he can,
you can
Then you
respond
can
about why
respond
that's
to
a
that.
problem.
Yeah, that's perfect.
With
Why
it.
it's
And we didn't want to disrespect anyone.
Jesus.
we don't want to disrespect himself.
I'm sorry, which section was that for?
That was section 13, right?
13, if you're gonna make that.
Oh, with that change, okay, and that's okay.
And then he'll
And Patrick
testify
will-
after he's seen it.
13 and 14.
And 14,
14 is just, do we need, well, there was another question about, do we need both notwithstanding employees?
yeah, that was another question that I waived, because when you waived, so,
That's- I don't know where we say notwithstanding, that's what the note I had, but I don't,
Well,
oh,
they
yeah, we say
obviously-
notwithstanding here is authorized to waive.
so my point is, when we give the agency authorization to waive or modify, inherent in that is notwithstanding those provisions, so isn't it redundant, in terms of line 17 and 18, on page 24? In other words, where,
Right, I think it's,
The way it's done.
I think it's just generally included to make sure that we acknowledge that, yes, this is where it is required ordinarily. I don't know, anytime you,
well, why wouldn't you say the agency of transportation is authorized to waive or modify, the eligibility requirements, within subdivision, blah, 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 for your, replace your ride? It just seemed kind of cumbersome to say, you're notwithstanding, by virtue of that, it doesn't apply, and then you're gonna say, well, we'll waive something that we've already said doesn't apply.
Right.
I don't know,
that is kind of standard, I could check to see if we ever don't, but.
Okay.
well, I'm just wondering, I'm waking up from a reverie after 2 decades.
Okay, so your check on that to see if that's the way it's always done, but I agree with Senator Kitchell on that, but we can just see how that's done. And do we have any other really questions about this flexibility in emergencies? I don't think so.
I don't, if
So
the,
otherwise, we're closed it out except for whether we need to both waive and notwithstand.
yeah, and then,
Exactly.
and if there haven't been any vehicles, then we don't need to deal with retroactive, but if there are, then we should, to authorize the waiving of these provisions.
Waive and notwithstand. Okay, section 15.
Section 15, which begins at the bottom of page 25, but is actually on page 26, makes two changes to the Electrify Your Fleet program. One is that it would provide that 2,500 purchase or lease incentive for electric bicycles and electric cargo bicycles, currently with a base MSRP of 6,000 on line 12 of page 26. And this would provide that purchase and lease incentive for those vehicles, those bicycles that are $10,000 or less.
Is it always 2,500 or is there a percentage part of that? Do you know, Michelle?
It's always 25.
So even if the bicycle's $3,000, it's 2,500? Is there a?
This was electric cargo bikes, or, well, electric, this is for fleets, okay, so it's a little bit different, but
That's part of the 500,000 that we've
Should be
done for electric,
Yeah.
the fuel.
Like, did we have language in other incentives where it's like a percentage or the dollar amount?
we have looked at that in the past. For whatever reason, we went with a set dollar amount on this one.
Just this one, but not the other one. Well, it seems like we wouldn't want somebody to get a cargo bike that costs $2,500 to get $2,500.
That's a good point.
Did we have some discussion, because you were looking at your estimates from Costco?
Right, does Costco sell cargo electric bikes?
I'm sure they-
Send me a check.
We know they sell electric bikes
With, yeah, that's.
for $200.
You bought your daughter a car when she could have had an e-bike for
I bought
300
myself
bucks.
a car, gave her my old.
Did you get it from Costco?
Okay. Would if they sold it, but it's not there.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask for a contribution to my.
You know,
political campaign.
ATVs,
Certainly is good.
I'm glad you said that,
Like
that's why we were.
$1,000 is a lot of money, isn't it? $50,000. Well, we're only giving them
Well, that
2,500.
brings up our sales tax.
Oh, that's true.
ATV.
ATVs, yeah. Well, just that they can't be that, which Center Ingles still.
Oh, is
Some
it,
of these
am
cost quite a bit on.
I correct that the 2,500 would be for G as well?
Yes.
We're just allowing a 2,500 toward a $50,000 purchase.
ATVs weren't in there.
I know, I guess because it's fleet, I mean, we know ski areas and, some
Other
utilities,
resorts.
you know, would be.
So is this staying open to consider whether it should be a percentage rather than, or in addition
Yeah.
to?
I would like to keep it open and then that we would suggest either from the agency or us about 2,500 or X percent, whichever is less.
20% capped at 2,500,
Yeah, I don't know if, yeah, or,
not to exceed 2,500.
yeah, or not to exceed 2,500 or 25%.
Administratively, though, to do that for this pilot for 500,000, I don't know whether it's worth getting so complicated.
Although,
Well,
We did it with something else. Didn't Patrick Murphy do this with another
I
program?
thought we had another program with a percentage.
I just don't believe that you should be able to get something for free if it's only $2,500.
well, this
That's an
is,
incentive, not a,
yeah, and this is under the fleet, so that's,
There's not gonna
that's
be a lot
a
of.
business,
so it's
that's,
not gonna be,
no.
it's not gonna be that hard for Patrick.
No, we can do that.
That's what happens if Patrick's not here, we get to learn.
He implemented it programmatically already. So, in the guidelines, there is criteria related to the, you know, that it's the percentage of cost, and I believe it's up to 25% of the cost or $2,500, whichever is lesser.
Less or fewer? Okay, so,
Now I'm waiting for a text response from that.
well, we're gonna leave that open and we'll add some
You'd
percentage.
like me to,
less than.
you'd like me to write
Patrick's
the,
coming in anyway, so it's fine.
you'd like me to write the language for that also, just in case?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And you can maybe get something from Patrick and Michelle.
Okay, I can do
They
that this
might already
afternoon.
be doing. So we have another witness to talk about our electric vehicle road distribution idea here. So I think we can stop here.
I think so, put ourselves out of our misery.
Thank you.
We got halfway through.
I do have that language. Would you like me to hang around so you can see it,
Which
or
language?
the road usage?
Um,
Oh, no, it was the registration that you asked for. Sorry, it was the road usage.
it's the same thing.
Okay.
We'll hear from Rob, and then if we have time, we can do that.
Okay, I'll hang around.
We are hoping to end a little early, 11:45.
Electric bus.
Yeah, to get on an electric bus if we want to. So, anything on
Where are you
it?
going
So
to?
ACWG, 5 minutes away there.
that way,
That way.
Oh,
oh, you've been there before.
I was there for their open house.
There's
So,
Yeah,
thank you,
bus.
Donna. So Megan, we would need to schedule Donna again to finish this work
Tomorrow,
tomorrow or Friday, right? Today's
Just Wednesday.
Today's all day, and then so Thursday or Friday. We have
Free
time.
all morning Friday. I've got some things going on tomorrow morning, and I've got an open time when you have somebody else scheduled, so.
You're live, you don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, the world can hear our scheduling. So that's just a note, figure that out.
Okay.
Because we also have limited time, the hours.
How much time?
Well, how long, was that an hour? What did we just spend to get through half of it? So at least another hour, if not more.
and some sections we could close out without legislative council. I mean,
Yeah,
we
we
have
could.
a budget all the time, if they, it's been written,
Right.
if we agree with it, we don't need to have
Right, we might
Donna
be able
sit
to get
here
through
and
part of it.
suffer.
That's fine.
Okay, Rob, you
Your
want
time
to?
is precious, Donna, more than ours.
So we had, in this committee, started talking about electric vehicles, road usage fee. I don't know if that's the right name.
Emma?
MUF is the mileage-based user fee, but what we charge electric vehicles.
Oh,
Do we call that a road usage fee? Or what? That's what
yes.
I put on the agenda, but I don't know if there's a better name for it. Just in case you have an idea.
The road's
So-
by another name.
So I know, Rob,
That sounds to be
Rob
a
Frostball.
good one.
Yeah.
Road
road
usage.
usage fee, that's what we're asking for. So, well, I don't know if Rob, if you heard from our testimony, or if you won't need any other information, or you just want to give us your testimony.
Yeah, I can just give my testimony. I listened to your testimony from last week, so I know the direction you're going. So hence, I'm not going to be submitting any written testimony because I have already done that. So based on some of these other things. So I can start, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So once again, I'm Rob Kidd with the Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club, we're one of the nation's largest and oldest conservation groups, and we've been deeply involved with vehicle electrification over the last 20 years. It's one of our top programs, Clean Transportation for All and electrification of vehicles. We've been involved with the National Drive Electric Week events to promote vehicle electrification, and we see this as a critical aspect of fighting climate change. And we appreciate all the work that the legislature has done to move this issue forward, move all the programs of vehicle electrification. I remember years ago that even the idea of incentives were thrown up as being crazy and it was too much to do. We didn't need to encourage that, but when you all start realizing how much carbon emissions are attributed to our transportation network, we know we need to do that. And so I want to thank all the work that's gone through this part, and even the Agency of Transportation, they've done some great work promoting vehicle electrification. But that's going to be instead of me praising them. I can't always praise all the time. But the Sierra Club, we actually are concerned about adoption of any type of fees on the electric vehicles still. Now, we realize that the agency and previous reports have thrown the flag of 15% market share till we implement any fees. So that's something we stand behind. We don't think we should do that. And the reason why I've been kind of told is basically once you reach that particular 15% market share, that new emerging technology can stand on its own. We don't need to supplement it at all. But still the concerns is we're far from reaching our goals. We're far from reaching our carbon reductions. And vehicle electrification is one of the best ways to reduce our carbon emissions that aren't overly going to tax us too much. So we see fees just kind of putting a chilling effect onto the adoption. Now, I understand.
Well, I just don't want to stop your thunder, but I just want to, while we're right there. So what do you say about the members who are demanding that we charge them a fee? Because that's why I think that's one of the reasons why that we're actually have taken up before the 15%, is that we're hearing from your constituents that they want to pay their fair share.
So I've heard from some of your members in this particular body, particularly Senator McDonald, who stated that I've disagreed with that statement because the majority of people I've talked to still do not support that. And I'm going to step it back just a little bit. For our original position within the Sierra Club is we didn't support any type of fee on electric vehicles until there was comparable legislation penalizing for those that caused the damage. So when you see that the damage has been caused by internal combustion engines, a family member of mine has asthma, never smoked, and it's basically attributed because of emissions in the air.
We're trying to do something with that,
Right.
with
Yes.
in judiciary, to recognize the damage, and similar to what we did with tobacco, obviously.
So
So we're not denying that. I guess what we're trying to figure out is whether these fees are gonna, waiving or not having them in place is a chilling effect, or the extent to which incentives or adopting the California standards are gonna also be catalysts to get to that level. And our issue really is one, if we did that, then ultimately we would be able to, without robbing other parts of the transportation plan or budget, work on what seems to be the most chilling effect, and that is confidence that the charging network is robust and available. So we've got kind of competing priorities as it would relate to the, the diffusion and the take-up of EVs, and so that new term range anxiety seems to be, and certainly I understand it. I mean, I've been beside the road with an EV that was out of charge. So, and what caused that? So I guess we're just trying to say, how do we deal with what seems to be one of the more compelling reasons why there's a reluctance to take up or to purchase an EV, and that is charging stations and the availability and the confidence that requires. So, I mean, that's kind of the context on what we're having this discussion.
yeah, so I agree with that. There are so many challenges within the electric vehicle supply equipment and accessing charging. And there's
How much should we pay? Keep on paying and paying and paying before we get a return on all what we're paying for. I mean, we're paying for, there has not been one ever, at one time, has there ever been a fuel station that's been set up with government money. So we're standing up this program, we're standing up everything, we're giving incentives, and we're charging taxpayers, and we're doing all of that. And then at the end of the day, there is a portion of what we're paying for is using our roads, causing damage to our roads the same way. We're not talking about causing damage to air, we're causing damage to roads. So how long do we end up paying for all of that stuff for you guys not to have to pay anything?
Yeah, okay. So the part about damaging to our roads, actually, you see how much we're right now 12,000 plug-in electric vehicles on the road. That's minimal compared to
You do the same amount
overall
of damage to the back roads
right now.
today as what any other car does, and I follow electric vehicles all the time.
Well,
They're going on the same roads.
I agree, but let's just let you finish your testimony and then we.
Yeah, so like I hear a lot of your concerns is, yes, we're gonna have to figure out how to do that. And one of the things is Sierra Club we've been advocating for a number of years is that we do a more comprehensive review about all funding options. In the last number of years, I've not heard of any other fee accepted by the administration to oppose that we can't do.
They didn't even support the fees we did last year.
Right, and it's like, but we need to kind of look at it comprehensively how to do funding of our transportation transit. I know the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission did a study on that, where you look at it, there's a study and goes, well, politically, this is not feasible, politically, this is not feasible. So what are we gonna do? Are we gonna continue with an antiquated gas tax type system? So we would like to see some type of more broader, comprehensive solution, because yes, we're gonna have to pay for our pedestrian infrastructure, which bikes don't pay for our roads right now, even though the people driving like myself, I pay road taxes and I pay my other taxes, but when I'm on my bike, the bike path, I'm not paying for that. So we have to figure out other ways. How we're gonna fund transit systems. Now, that's a whole nother challenge where we have people like who wanna access more buses, but we can't because there's not enough demand for it. And we gotta figure out that. So I understand the challenges you all have, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but I'm just saying part of our idea is with vehicle electrification, that's our solution to our climate problems. And that is one of the most equitable ways to solve our climate issues, because Vermonters spend so much time in individual personalized vehicles. We don't want to see added fees added onto something that may slow down the adoption. Now, I am reasonable that yes, we do need to come up with something. And I've heard the mileage driven fee, or the fee that you want to do an added additional registration fee. So we see that need, and that's what I'm saying is that 15% market share, yes. Now, I also want to argue is I know the 15% market share, according to the agency reports and what you put in statutes, also includes plug-in hybrids. Well, the Sierra Club, we do not support the long-term adoption of plug-in hybrids, so we would like to see fully electric, not plug-in hybrids, because hybrids are still tied to the fossil fuel economy, which is damaging, and it's still perpetuating that path. So I know you guys have hard decisions, so I want to try to be reasonable. And I see that is inevitable, you're going to have to establish something. And I've seen it so many other areas that we're kind of struggling with charging infrastructure. I testified in Senate Economic Development around the right to charge legislation, and particularly about helping renters in multi-unit dwellings access charging, because they're actually going to be struggling to charge their cars. So maybe if you do adopt a fee, you push it towards some type of electric vehicle support. Dedicate the revenues towards that. So that's what I see as a critical point, is if we're going to be like, you're searching for funds, which I know you are. I heard the testimony you commented about, like, switching money from maintenance, which you really don't support. I agree taking money from maintenance, but I understand the concerns why some folks don't. So you're trying to piece it together with what resources you do have. So we would like to see that. If any program is established, it designates towards EV adoption for the short term. You can sunset it for a number of years. Now, also, we want to make sure that any fees adopted are not punitive and they're not cost prohibitive. Now, in some other states, they purposely added fees in there despite of vehicle electrification because they don't want it to happen. And that's been our experience with the Sierra Club, is a lot of other states have actually purposely added additional fees because they want to disincentivize vehicle electrification because
I hope it's clear that that's not our motivation.
I realize that your motivation is not, so I don't want to put that saying why you guys are doing it. You guys are dealing with financial struggles and then you have to come up with a budget, so I understand that. Also, I really support the concept that was in HA 68 about having the Treasury and the Climate Action Office come and looking at comprehensive funding opportunities, because that's what we're going to have to look at. Addressing about cars damaging roads. Well, I know the idea has come out about putting an additional fee on parcel deliveries in some of our towns. I live a small little dead end in Montpelier that I see UPS truck multiple times a day. I see the FedEx truck multiple times, and every other carrier service coming up and down that road, and it's small. They're doing more damage than any EVs is doing.
Well, we do that with higher registration fees with them already.
Well, I mean, but we've
when they purchase.
But we've increased this demand of online shopping, and everybody is even penalizing our own communities, because now people can easily just order from their home, and it's adding more to demand. So I just see that, like, on my little dead end street, how much these box trucks are coming up.
Maybe they're not driving to the mall.
But maybe, I didn't think about that part.
Good spot, you know?
So,
Do you have a suggestion of a fee level, or you just would say, have us look at other states?
I would say maybe if you are gonna adopt it, keep it minimal, because I see the intent of what you want to do. You're trying to raise revenue. And I saw what the agency proposed is, was it, how much?
$69.
$69.
We felt that needed to be a bit higher and include plug-in hybrids, because they do obviously
Right.
use,
But then while the agency is going through and waiting for the federal grant to come to do the mileage-based fee, I was like, are you gonna implement a new program and then keep that going, or are you gonna look at this as the path?
no, we thought it as a bridge to
Right.
getting to something.
We don't know
more
how long
refined.
it's gonna take, because it could take
Right.
a lot longer than that.
But I still look at even the 15% threshold, where I'm still, we're, you know, look at the total fleet. We're between 3 and 4% of the total fleet. So we're not that many electric vehicles. And I even heard somebody say, yeah, I know a bunch of people who don't even drive further with their electric vehicle. So they're putting less miles on their vehicle. Myself, I only have one vehicle, it's electric, and that's the car my wife and I primarily drive.
So there's
A few comments. I really appreciate your testimony. Regarding the 15%, I gotta go back to it, but I thought it was 15% of new purchases and not necessarily the
Yeah.
fleet. Okay.
Yeah, that is the way you
Set it up.
defined it, and even what the original study that the Agency of Transportation did back in 2016 defined it.
We're closer to that if I recall, but yeah, I'm sensitive to doing this prematurely to dampen electric vehicle acquisition, because I certainly want that. You raised three things that have been percolating, and I'd love to just crystallize them to see if you prioritize one over the other. One, you mentioned emissions-based penalty registration. So if you have a car with worse emissions, I don't know if our VINs can determine that, if we have that systematically recorded.
That
So
could
I'm-
be very regressive
I'm-
when you look at the our older people, yeah, and our poor.
So I'm not opposed to it, but I just think logistically it could be really problematic. I am not, and this might get me in trouble when I run for re-election this summer, I'm not opposed to a gas tax increase. I think that we are relative to the other states in the middle of the pack, and that does collect from out-of-staters, and it also does tax where you don't, what you don't like, and subsidize what you do. But the other piece that I didn't hear you speak to that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, which has come up in this context, is my favorite word of the session, ad valorem. So do you see a value in having a value based of the car? So imagine a new Tesla registering at $80,000 within like 2024 or 2023. Should they pay a higher electric BEV fee than a 5-year-old entirely plug-in hybrid? Any thoughts on that?
So I remember I actually looked into this issue a number of years ago. It was House former chair Kurt McCormick wanted to do a kind of a luxury tax, and I remember looking at the numbers, and I said, you know, a lot of those luxury vehicles are more damaging even still on the road. So like you see a bigger SUV is more damaging on the road, or even if it's electric. So I don't know how to structure it. I know the DMV opposed it because it was just they don't think they could have followed through it. But it's something I think is worth looking into of how we can fund these different things. It's not something my local Sierra Club is 100% behind, but we've potentially looked into exploring it. So it's not something I oppose, but it could be a policy consideration. But this is why I want to see this other study between the Treasurer's Office of Climate Action and the agencies to do is look at it, put everything on the table of what we can do to fund these programs, not put a piecemeal going after EVs, which is our climate solution. That's one of our primary methods of outside of the renewable energy standard, which which you will look at in probably a month or two.
Last question. One other thing that percolated, and I'd just love to hear your reaction to, is to sunset this interim solution. So 3 years, and then looking 3 years out, whoever's sitting around this
Or you could
table.
write it, a bridge to when you implement,
So if you're dedicating it towards some type of EV program, I say a sunset would be reasonable to do, because basically you have to look at the future and making sure you're funding it, but that's the way you're proceeding it.
Any
So
other
in
questions?
research, I know that you're saying 15% would be kind of the tipping point. The people I know, and I have people in my own family, the registration fee is not the consideration for their purchase. It is not the deciding factor for why they went for an EV. So I don't know whether it's viewed as an incentive that you don't have to, pay for the use of the road in the same way other users do that use. We do have use gasoline, for example, or diesel. So I'm just wondering, out of all the strategies we've got here, whether in fact for the general take-up, certainly for lower income individuals that might be getting the incentives, and particularly for the replacement vehicles, that it becomes more of a concern. But in terms of the purchase, is there any evidence that that particular benefit sways anybody's decision to buy?
I've seen it in other states where they've added the additional fees that were, it's kind of restricted.
Yeah.
Like it's restricted. That's why our position is kind of like, if you do, make sure it is still lower than what the equivalency of the gas tax, because we want to still incentivize it. We want to encourage this. We don't, this the behavior we want to see. So we don't want to like kind of penalize it. Now, yes, it is a minimal, but you see so many fees get taxed on and so many other, you go to like my EV when I purchased it last year, walk in there and you see this fee, and you're like, oh my God. And it's just like, it just adds up to the overall cost. And now, but EVs are dropping down costs.
Are there any more fees that get added to an EV than?
No, just, but every other car, it's just like you see other fees added onto it, and everywhere we're at
You used to
today.
be a car dealer.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I do know that, I've got several people in my family, and the motivation is certainly not because they save on, on the gas tax.
I'd love to be able to go in anywhere and say, this is where I want my tax dollars to go, because this is what I believe. That's what you're doing. You're telling us where all the fees that we're gonna collect, that they go here or go there. I'd like to be able to have that power myself to go and say, this is how I live my life, and this is where, you know what, I don't like that over there. So I want my tax dollars to go over there. I don't want it to go over there. So please make sure my tax dollars don't go over there. I think your argument gets away from the reality of what we're trying to do is simply collect a fee for the amount of road uses that you guys are using, that you're not paying now. I think that's as simple as what it gets. But I would love in my life to be able to say, I don't support that over there, and I don't want my taxes to go there. I just don't want it.
When you say you guys, you mean just any EV drivers?
Yeah.
Not just Sierra Club.
No, right.
I'm both. I'm a Sierra Club member, employee, and I drive an EV. But
because it results in a very balkanization, or that we just not withstand it. So, but everybody would like to have a dedicated revenue.
I mean, this is the challenge you all have as representatives of our public. You have to weigh, choose the decisions that will get to reaching our policy goals, whether we prioritize addressing climate change, whether we prioritize making sure that every road in Vermont is paved. Like, that's difficult decisions you have to do, is you have to weigh in what your constituent wants, what is needed to get the policy considerations done. So I have a different view than you do, Senator, but I respect that. And so, but this is where our take goes on this issue, and we'd like to see minimal impacts on electric vehicles at this time. And would encourage you to do it.
I thought about the fact that we have the rules now for the California standards. I would think that you would envision that would have a positive impact.
Yes, I actively pursued and pushed that, and I think the California rules are great because we're going to actually make sure that we've sent the signals to the automotive manufacturers to provide us with those vehicles. Otherwise, we could be hindered without making progress. So I think even some of the requirements in there, equity requirements within the California rules are good. I think it's essential, even the battery recycling agreements within the California rules are something important because with how valuable the minerals are. So I think it's something that is I'm appreciative of the administrative support and the agency's dedication on making sure that that was followed through. And both agencies, the Agency of Transportation and Agency of Natural Resources, because without them, I think.
Well, we're gonna talk more about this in the future. We appreciate your involvement.
And I had submitted written testimony last year that was more about the mileage base fee, but it covers some of the same principles, so I'm not gonna resubmit something for you all. You all have basic understanding of what our position is, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.